Hi, I'm Charles Morris. Welcome to the Journey 2020, where we come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. at www.thejourney2020.com. And we're on Twitter, Periscope, we're on YouTube, so we're all over the place. And we ask you to please subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure that you hit that like button on Facebook. And I always have to remind you, not don't have to, but I have to remind you in the sense of something that's so important, and that is the third Monday of every month we have Dr. Kathy Meeks from Robinson and Associates. And the reason why I say I have to remind you is because once you watch the show, then you understand, because Dr. Meeks is a sex therapist, a family therapist. So we have a lot of fun with that. Some serious stuff and not so serious stuff. But the reason why she comes on the show is because she just feels that it's so very important for us to kind of get to know ourselves a little better, kind of deal with some of the myths, but also to try to have a healthy and better lifestyle when it comes to our families and how we see others and how we see ourselves, from intimacy to just trying to just fight through some of the stuff that we kind of keep in the closet a little bit. And so she's a fun person, great energy. Love having her on the show. We get great feedback. So you make sure that you tune in the third Monday of every month. And make sure you tune in on the fourth Monday, because I have with me, I think, a gentleman who has one of the most important programs in the United States of America, and that is Hakeem Nkrumah of Young Fathers of Central Florida. Her key program has been around for about 10 years, and he's helping our young fathers step up to the plate and better understand their roles as fathers. Now, he has a young man in his program as young as 12 years old as a father. And so the ages range from 12, 13, 14, 15 on up to about the age 27, trying to help them not fall behind and not be behind the eight ball because of some actions that took place. But they're saying, you know what, there is a future for you. Don't become a statistic. And I've been in a lot of the meetings and I've seen the difference. I've seen these young men asking questions. I've seen the young ladies that are involved also coming together, ironing out that craziness. And you know how we are when we're young. And so with that being said, Hakeem Nkrumah is also answering questions on child custody and all the stuff where we get caught up in the court system and fighting through the red tape and becoming very frustrated. Because I've seen some of these young men at the meeting with tears in their eyes, crying because they want to see their child. And they're trying to figure out, like, why is all of this happening, and so on and so forth. But then there's always that thing of, child support payments, and you gotta, it's going to catch up with you at some point in time. And so he emphasized all those things and how important it is that you're now a father. That's the fourth Monday of every month right here at www.thejourney2020.com. Now, for those who watched the show last week, this is part two of a two-part series in where we're highlighting and talking about a great program. When I was talking about Young Fathers of Central Florida, this program, man, and I talked with Vince Carter Sr., and we do a show called Youth Central Sports every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Make sure that you tune into that at youthcentralsports.com. And I talk with Vince all the time about how, man, I'm so jealous that these kids now have all these different things that I wish that I had when I was young. Okay, so if Vision of Flights was around when I was a kid, I definitely would have tried to take an advantage. I would have tried to take advantage of that as well, because I was telling Mike McKenzie, who you're going to meet in a minute, about for a quick minute at the age of 18, coming out of high school, that they were talking about some of the things that you could only dream about. Because as a kid, I'm in elementary school, and my true dream, nobody really knew this, but I wanted to be an astronaut. I really did. When I'm there and I watch them in 1969, I'm going to go back. I remember sitting on my grandmother's floor watching them go to the moon, and I was all excited. And I said, man, I would love to be an astronaut, but I had no idea how to make that happen. And so when there was a word out that they was looking for air traffic controllers, and I was like, wow, okay, well, how can I do that? Well, I had no idea. And so Mike McKenzie, who is from Vision of Flights, this is a two-part series. From last week, by sheer accident, I was telling Mike about my friend Alan T-Bone. Well, I should say T-Bone, no, AKA Alan Wilson. That I'm not used to calling him Alan, but I'll try and call him Alan today. But I was telling him about my friend at the age of 17 when we would put our money together. We would put our money together and we would say, okay, well, we're going to go rent the plane. And he would take us up flying around Jacksonville Beach. And I remember flying over and looking out at the water and how that was at the age of 17. So a lot of people may like, wow, you guys were flying and back then? Yes. And so we're going to talk about Vision of Flight. This is part two of a two-part series. So I want to welcome both. Well, actually, you know what? Let me play this real quick, and then you'll have a better understanding before we bring in Mike and Alan. See, I'm good, Alan. Let me play this real quick.
Hello, my name is Mike McKenzie, and I'm the president of Vision of Flight. We're an aviation awareness program here in Central Florida that introduces the youth of our communities to the possibilities that exist for them in aviation and airspace. This unique program teaches kids and brings them into an actual environment to where they can learn, comprehend, and hopefully passion towards some of the great possibilities and careers that exist in aviation and airspace. As you know, we have great needs in our country, plenishing the infrastructure for our professionals. Here's where it begins. To find out more about Vision of Flight and what our program offers, our dates and activities, please visit visionofflight.org. We thank you and we welcome your support.
All right, I got two brothers on the line right now that hey, you can't believe the myth. You can't believe the myth because we have Mike McKenzie and also Alan Wilson, brothers who are pilots who've been flying. Well, I know, I don't know what year, Mike, because you say you've been flying since you was 13. And T-Bone, I think you started flying at what age 17?
No, I was actually 23 years old.
Wait a minute now. Hold on, wait a minute. When we was doing the thing, when we was renting the plane, you was 20.
Yeah, I was 23 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Cause see, what?
Yep,
No.
23. It seemed like it was longer than that, but I was actually 23.
No. Because I'm trying to do the time thing now. I mean, because I was trying to associate it when I was still in Jacksonville, and so
Okay.
and no, well, I mean, but I was trying to do it when I was still in Jacksonville because I left to go off to school. So I was trying to do the connection when Crow came and said, "Hey, T-Bone is flying," and so for us to get together like that, so I was just trying to do the connection that I was still in the neighborhood, but I guess I came back home.
That was the
But
time that you were visiting back in Jacksonville.
okay, so you was 23. At what age did you say, you know what, I want to start learning to fly?
Well, it was January, and I was actually 23 years old at that time. And I still don't know what exactly carried me to the airport that day, but I was headed towards Craig Airport, just running an errand. And I looked over and saw airplanes taking off, and I decided to turn that way and check into possibly learning to fly. What I did, I checked into it, and I went on what they call an intro flight. After that, I was hooked.
Okay.
And the intro
Okay.
flight, basically, they carry you up and just carry you up for about 15, 20 minutes just to get you accustomed to flying an airplane and to introduce you to flying.
Okay. Well, Mike, we we heard your story last week, but quickly you gotta we have to start over again to kind of help us out because I understand that at the age of 13 is when you started flying. I think you started taking lessons at 12.
I
So quickly,
started
kind of
taking
take us back
lessons.
to just yesterday because you know that was just yesterday, right?
That was just yesterday. It went back quick, but it was just yesterday. But yes, at age 12, I was fortunate to receive a birthday present, and that was for attending the Brooklyn School of Aviation in Brooklyn, New York. And yeah, I was still way young for actual flight lessons. So they actually made me go through a 10-hour simulation course.
Mhm.
So during that time, they saw that I excelled at it because this was my passion. So um, after that was completed, they said, let's take you up on a couple of flights and just see how you. And they started taking me out to the airport. But it was a little too costly at the time. So, mom and dad gave me the intro and I took it from there later on.
Okay. Well, I wanted to feature Vision of Flights and to talk about the upcoming event with the What's My Anti-Drug Use Summit. But more importantly, the feel of aviation, and I'm going to play the other promo in a minute. But in that promo, you talk about the jobs that are available. And like earlier when I was talking about as a little kid, I really wanted to be an astronaut. I had no idea that how to make that happen. But that whole thing of just going off into space just was fascinating to me. And I just thought that was such a cool thing to be an astronaut. But those kind of doors where you didn't even know how to even begin to even knock on that door. And now I have two black pilots, which to us is not unusual, but for some, especially where I'm from, they will look at you. And I think been mentoring for so long, sometimes people think that certain things was just handed to you and you either come from a wealthy family or all these other things, but they don't know our background and where we from. And so they just see it's like I've been doing production when it comes to people seeing things, the end result of doing a show, and they don't know what's going on behind the scenes to make that show happens. They just think that all of a sudden the show just happens, but there's hard work and there's still madness going on while the show is going on. But they only see what they see, so their interpretation is like, well, you're standing there but they don't understand what you had to fight through. And I'm going to ask, and I don't, and I'm not trying to put this in the category of race and all this other stuff, but can each of you kind of tell me, is there something that you had to fight through when it came to your color of skin based on this field that you have excelled in?
I'll let you
Go
go
ahead, Mike.
first, Alan. Okay. Well, one of the biggest draws for me was owning my company, Wheels to Wings, and realizing that working around the environment and dealing with the upper class, the people of status, and not seeing enough color, enough representation coming out of the cockpits and things of that nature. I saw, you know, lots of us working around the ramp and doing those type things, but I didn't see enough of us coming out of the cockpit, which kind of put a jolt in me to make sure that I did something with the resources I had through my company to establish something that can get more of these kids at least enlightened to the possibilities that existed for them. Um, I was always, a guy who was serious about the whole diversity and inclusion thing. I don't see in color. So I welcome every ethnicity, every race. I just refuse to kind of get caught up in that whole singling out and, feeling alienated. I will make sure that other kids as well understand that that's the way they have to kind of envision themselves to progress towards the future. And it was that brought me towards Vision of Flight. I realized that it was a way for us to get everyone in one environment, an environment that's conducive to higher learning, but at the same time, um, it could show them all that we're all just the same, when placed in the same situations and given the same information, we can, digest it just the same. And I think that's where we're now finding our successes. And yeah, but I mean, I saw it and I did something about it.
Okay.
And I hope that it
One of
progresses
the
forward.
things that we are talking about, and that was last week, last show, and when I said that you said something that was very prominent in your spirit and in your personality, it was that you got it because you're not a victim of society when it comes to how society says who you are. Because
Yeah.
whatever it is that God gave you, whether it's just a spirit that He gave you, whether or not it's something that came from a mentor, whether or not it's something that came from your parents, but you're able to see past that in which our society try to label us or label certain people. So therefore, once you see the label, then you started to see yourself in a certain way, and then even your own walls start to go up because your self value and how certain parts of society say this is what you are. And so last week when you said what you said, remember I was saying you saw past that, and for you to understand that we're not who they say that we are, and that you're just like any and everybody else, which is a key factor in everything that you say, because a lot of people don't have that perspective which God gave you because they have fed into the myth, they have fed into the lie. And so I know with us, especially us people of color, we have to fight through that a lot. And to because from what I understand, a lot of times it is so bad now, Mike, that we are our own worst enemy because we believe the myth, among
Mm.
ourselves. And that's another show, but I wanted to acknowledge that you saw past that, and your spirit and allowed you to come out of that wherever you came from, for you to see life in the true perspective for what it is. And I think that's why you do what you do in Vision of Flights.
Could I add to that for you,
Yes,
Charles?
right.
In 2011, I had the opportunity to meet with some of the red tail pilots, some of the Tuskegee Airmen guys that actually flew during World War II overseas, and I posed the question to them, how did they feel, as black aviators, knowing that our country didn't want them, but yet they went over there and went all the way across the ocean to fight in a war, against some people that, they didn't like them either. But how did you feel? And the answer was the same from all of them. They said, "Look, Mike, when we went over there, we didn't know anything different. We just knew that we wanted to show that we were just as good or better. And we, used the time that they isolated us at the bases to play games with each other, and we became good. They segregated them and placed them on these bases that were all black bases, right? And during that time, they would use that opportunity to play their skill, play games while flying combat, practicing to amongst each other just to be good. And they were so prepared when they got the opportunity. That's why their record is so impeccable. That's why they've made the history that they have, placed upon us. And that's why now I use that as kind of a catchphrase as to why it's important for these kids to look past, all the disparities and find ways to fight through, everything that they see and is being told. Look past that. Your skills are just as great, if not greater, than the next person.
Yeah.
So, we refuse to allow that to take over anymore.
Okay. Yeah, and now, before I ask T-Bone, I wanted to, and you may know about this, but there was a gentleman who had he was at some event and he saw a couple of the Tuskegee Airmen, this white gentleman, and Mike, he went over to them. He just started crying. He said, "You guys saved my life," and he said, "Because of you guys, I'm here today." And I just want to acknowledge you to let you know. And he bowed down to him and say, "You saved my life, and thank God you guys were there." And it's with that you go like, "Wow, that was powerful. That was powerful." Very, very powerful. Um,
There are many stories of that, and I had the good fortune of hearing some of them directly from the aviators that have experienced that. And you know, when you look back at where we were then and all the different things that were said negatively to place us in a box,
mhm.
and then to look at what those gentlemen accomplished to make sure that those myths were disproven and you know every barrier was broken down. So we've already been there, done that. So, my thing is let's not allow ourselves to sit there and debate or, try to figure out if it's true. We have already done that. So moving
Okay.
forward, we have to just speed this up and get to where we need to go, get our kids, our people on track to realizing that no, don't think about that. Move forward with what we need to do.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
progress is being stagnated by the too much thinking about it,
Okay.
too
Well,
much worrying about it.
now, T-Bone, I want to ask you, were you ever discouraged, along your journey before you got your license? Was there any barriers that you was like, man, somebody's trying to make this difficult, for me?
No, I've never actually been discouraged. In most cases, anything I was determined to do, I would not stop until I completed it. But as you mentioned earlier, a lot of times people will look at a person, for example, look at an actor, and you think, wow, he really has it made. But you probably did not realize that for years, he or she has been working up to that point. You didn't see the part where they may have been waiting on tables, or as Steve Harvey said, that he actually slept in his car because he didn't have a place to stay. But there's always a journey coming up to your success. When I was flying, as Mike said, it was quite expensive. So it was, I'm not going to say it was out of reach, but it was something that I had to work at. I actually was working a full-time job at the time, and I was living at home with my mom, and I was a single guy, and I had no kids. So that was a little bit of an advantage there. Also, with my full-time job, I was cutting yards. I was working as a part-time mechanic, and I was also trimming trees. I had a chainsaw, and I learned how to climb trees and trim trees for people. So with all of that, that's one of the ways I got extra money to take flying lessons. There were a couple of guys that started the same day that I started in January. Well, one guy's dad was a paint contractor. He had a lot of money. He just gave the flight school all the money, and basically in 30 days he had his private pilot's license. Well, I was not that wealthy. What I did was, I paid for my lessons each time I went. So he got his private pilot's license in 30 days. I got my private pilot's license in 6 months. It took a while, but I was never discouraged because I was determined to do it. I would leave my job and my full-time job. As I said, I did other part-time things, but I thought that if I could go once a week and take a lesson, then eventually I would get through the course. Well, I was able to do once a week for the first 2 weeks. Then I decided I could do a little bit more. So I was able to fly twice a week. And that's paying for the airplane, renting the airplane, and paying the instructor. Well, the guys who just gave the flight school a lot of money, they actually were flying, taking lessons twice per day. That's the reason they got their private pilot's license in about 30 days, where it took me 6 months. But after getting my private pilot's license, that's when I used to carry you guys up, Charles, because I needed to build up flight time if I wanted to get a commercial license and possibly get a job flying. At that particular time, it was mainly just a hobby. But after enjoying it a lot, I thought about possibly wanting to fly for a living. Well, the job I was working on at the time was actually starting to go downhill. I thought that I would climb the corporate ladder and get promotions in the company, but the job started going downhill. But at that time, I was serious.
Wait a minute, I don't want to cut you off, but is that the Sears?
That's the Sears.
Okay. See, I remember that's the Sears job, right? Okay.
That's it. Sears started to go downhill. To make a real long story short, Sears built a building in Jacksonville, which was going to be their catalog distribution center. Well, once they got rid of their large catalog, if anybody can remember back then, that building was, I would say, basically no longer needed. So that's when all the jobs started going downhill. So I needed to build up flight time to get a commercial license so that I could possibly get a job flying. So I would get anybody together that was interested in taking a plane ride or sightseeing or flying to maybe Orlando or Brunswick for lunch, anything I could do to start building flight time. Well, after I finished that flight school and got my private pilot's license, I met a guy who was a great instructor, and he was also an FAA examiner. In fact, he was the guy who carried me for my very first check ride as a private pilot. He saw that I was interested in aviation and learning to fly, and he sort of took me under his wing. He instructed me through my instrument, multi-engine, and commercial license. Well, once I got my commercial license, I did have enough time to get a flying job. So at 28 years old, I actually started sending out a few resumes, and I got my very first flying job at 28 years old. Well, once I got that flying job, it was a 5-day-a-week job. I was actually flying freight. So I built up enough time to actually get an ATP, which is an airline transport pilot's license. I took that check ride. Actually, I studied, I got the test done, and I took that check ride. I passed that check ride, and I then had an airline transport pilot's license. I started sending resumes out to airlines hoping to get a job. However, I flew freight for 3 years, and I flew for a charter company after flying freight for 3 years. I flew for the charter company for 2 years. After that, that company business slowed down, and I was actually laid off. At that time, I was a freelance corporate pilot for the next 5 years, which I flew for different companies around the city. Um, and again, there was another guy who took entry, and he started calling me quite a bit. And I built up a lot of time flying with that particular company. First Union Bank, if you all can remember that bank, they actually had a flight department. It was based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but they had one airplane that was based here in Jacksonville. Well, the pilots that were here, I got to know them. They started also using me as what we call a contract pilot when they needed somebody. Well, eventually, after flying contract with them part-time for that was about 2 years. They actually offered me a full-time job flying a corporate jet with them. I worked for them from 1995 to 2004. They wanted me to move to Charlotte at that particular time, and I was not really interested in moving to Charlotte. I wanted to stay in Jacksonville. So I left that job and started working for a large corporation out of North Florida, which I'm currently with now. And I've been with them now for 15 years. And flying as a 28-year-old, back when I first got my very first flying job, you mentioned that there's a lot of times people may stereotype you or may not think that you have the intelligence as they thought the Tuskegee Airmen did not have.
That's a nice way of putting it. That's a nice way of putting it.
But there were a lot of places when I was flying for the charter company. I would fly into different airports, and sometimes small airports, sometimes larger airports. I'd pull up to the FBO, and I'd get out of the airplane, getting out of the pilot seat, letting passengers off the airplane, and you'd be surprised at the stares that I would get sometimes. But that never discouraged me. I'm sorry, Mike?
I know.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I would get the strangest stares from people on occasions, and it didn't discourage me. It just made me more proud to be able to show that I was just as intelligent as anybody else that was on the airport. Oh. But flying different places in different type aircraft was always a lot of fun for me. I always enjoyed that because, as I was telling you guys last week, anything fast, I enjoyed it. It was a fast bicycle, a fast motorcycle, a fast car.
That is true. That is true.
And fast spins too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always a challenge also, Mike. I would carry some friends up on occasions, and if they were interested in doing some acrobatics, then I would maybe do a couple. I would fly a 150 Aerobat, which was a pretty good acrobatic airplane, and I would do spins and do rolls and loops, and in a lot of cases they enjoyed it, and in some cases I think I may have made a couple of people sick that weren't really accustomed to some of the G's. But it was a lot of fun, and to this day, I've been flying now for 39 years, and every time I get on an airplane, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Okay. Now, as you tell this story, and I'm asking the both of you, and when did you get to that point? Because you get into this plane, and I'm asking the both of you, when did you get to that point where you go, you know what, let me just do a loop and let me do a flip, let me do this right here, because you have to now feel real comfortable in order to say, you know what, let me try this. And what was it like the first time you did try something like that? And I'm asking the both of you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, well, I was just like, acrobatics was never really my thing. I kind of stayed straight level flying, okay. I did go and dab with it at Embry-Riddle. I took that spin training course that they had in the decathlon. So that kind of, at least it was there mainly for comfort. You know what I mean? Just get in a situation and being comfortable enough to recover from it. But sounds to me like Alan there was quite the trailblazer.
Oh yeah. Mike, the kids in the neighborhood had mini bikes, right? And so T-Bone did his little thing, and he'll tell you that he changed the sprocket on his bike to and he'll explain it where it was a smaller sprocket what made it spin because that's what he told me. That's how he explained it. And all of a sudden he
That's
got the fastest bike in the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I was telling you that anything fast, I would always like it, and I was pretty good with mechanics and things, and so I actually went to college to be an engineer. So I knew a few things that I could do to make my mini bike a little bit faster than everybody else's. So I actually reversed a couple of sprockets and to make the bike to make the rear wheel actually turn faster than it was designed to turn. Right. That was the bottom line.
Right.
But,
Now,
I had the only mini bike in the neighborhood that would actually run 55 miles an hour.
now, just to show you, Mike, this is typical T-Bone. There's a guy in the neighborhood now. T-Bone had a car, and William Biggins had a car, right? So they had these two cars. What they used to do is, if you're familiar with Jacksonville, they have these bridges. So they would go at the top of the bridge on the downhill. That's when they would see how fast their cars would go. Now, am I lying?
And
those are some those are steep bridges up in Jacksonville.
Yeah,
they're pretty steep. Yeah.
Right, and then we won't talk about that time. Now we won't get into this, but I remember the story. See, I remember when he driving, and then he looked in the rearview mirror, right, and he saw a highway trooper, right, and T-Bone punched it. A few miles up the way, how many cars was there waiting on you, T-Bone?
Oh. T-Bone was an outlaw at
that. He had this Nova that he souped up where you had the big tires in the back and with that and it was a 3-speed and the typical teenager, so that whole thing. So yeah, that was for him to do loops and spins. That fits right into his personality. Yeah,
man.
but more importantly now,
No, I was saying the way I started doing the loops and spins is, I would watch the military guys, and they looked like they were really enjoying themselves in those military fighters. So I went up actually with an instructor, and he showed me how to do my very first spin.
Okay.
And, after that, he was telling me he could actually teach me acrobatics, but I never got into an acrobatic school. But I would rent this little Cessna 150 Acrobat, which was a fully acrobatic airplane. So I basically went up and taught myself some acrobatics just by trial and error. But, you get up high enough. I mean, you get up high enough. If you make a mistake,
that's all it is. Get up 2,500 and go for it.
Yeah, if you're up high enough, you have a lot of room to recover.
There you go.
If you make a mistake. So I basically kind of went up and I started doing loops and rolls, and and I just finally was comfortable enough doing some of that stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, you know, I told a story about when Crow came and said, "Hey, man, when you go up there, T-Bone is gonna want to do the tailspin. He want to do something." He said, "Don't do it." So, but see, T-Bone at the time, I didn't know he was telling me because he threw up. I didn't find out till a couple of years later. So, like I said, when we went up, Mike, we wasn't up there 5 minutes. Hey, you want to do a tailspin? No.
Just keep it straight and level, man. Man.
Now, Mike, doing the promo, which I'm going to play, you talk about the jobs that are available, and once you talk about what you try to instill in the kids to let them know, as well as the parents, the field of aviation and the possibilities that are there.
Yeah. You know, some of the cool stuff, it's not just about the piloting aspect, but you have from the mechanics to the engineers, the designers of avionics and this world of advanced technology. We're trying to figure out how to make things better, faster, right, T-Bone? More efficient. And we need the scientists. We need the people with creative minds, and they have to come from every walk of life. They have to, you know, we're missing a pool of talent that's not coming from the neighborhood. And we have to get them understanding that these things are there for them as well. And we need them to start looking at the possibilities. And that's what we're about, just trying to give them an insight into what is, just maybe ignite something within them. You know, you go over to the crash and rescue station at MCO and you hang out there with the guys at the station and gals, the guys and gals, because they are, I mean, they have a really good balance out there at MCO of men and women that are actually there serving amongst the crash and rescue team. And, you know, really cool stuff. So we brought some kids out there and they got to see that. And you know how many of them said they wanted to do that? You know, they saw something that fascinated them that much to whereas they knew that they were going to potentially save lives.
Right.
You know, the camaraderie that exists amongst, you know, firemen and those type of folks, because they live in such close proximity. They're tight, you know, and they saw that. And some of the kids, oh, I'd love to do that. But wow, you know, there are people that are doing, you know, navigating the airplanes through the air. The weathermen that are there constantly keeping us informed about, you know, weather and the significance and just there's so many different positions that are waiting to be filled by, you know, the kids that's sitting in Pine Hills or some of the other areas around Central Florida, around the country. That all they need to do is to just get one little glimpse into where that possibility might lie for them, and it changes the dynamic significantly. You know, so that's what it's about. I mean, as far as you can imagine, there is a need for you. Astronauts, we need more astronauts. We're glad to say that. We have one of our young ladies who came through Vision of Flight is actually, you know, at Embry-Riddle finishing up, and that's her passion. And you know what? I believe she's going to be an astronaut. The girl is smart. She's sharp. She's already gotten her scholarship to master's and PhD. And she wants to be an astronaut, and I really believe she will. There are many
Mike, where was Vision of Flights when I was in 1969, man? When I wanted to be an astronaut.
Where was it when I was growing up? I wish I could have gone back and met myself, in time. But the thing about it
Listen,
is,
let me ask you,
this is where we are right
because
now. Maybe that's what it was. We're supposed to be the teachers, not,
okay,
and
let me
that's what God imposed us and instilled in us, right? That's what we were left with.
let me ask you for the both of you, what's the longest flight you've ever taken, and where did you go?
Well, for me, it
Well,
was I carried I think I carried 9 people from Florida all the way to Vancouver, Canada. And that was, I was flying a Citation Sovereign. It took me about 6 hours and 10 minutes going westbound. And it was a pretty good trip all the way, but that's probably the longest I've actually sat in the cockpit.
Okay.
yeah. I guess my longest trip was I went to Chicago in a King Air out of New York, and then came down to I think Ohio, and then we back to New York, and that was probably the longest one that I'd ridden on, and I wasn't I was just sitting in the other seat, so to speak, because I
Uh-huh.
wasn't typed on the King Air or anything there,
Well,
but.
well, let me ask you, how has flying changed? Let's say from 20 years ago, has it changed as far as just sitting in the cockpit? How's it different now than it was
Yeah.
20 years ago?
Oh, greatly. I
Well,
mean, I think,
go,
yeah.
go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just going to say technology obviously is changing a lot. When I started flying, we had a panel that looked a lot different from the panels that they have now. Uh, we had what they call steam gauges. It was actually gauges you physically look at, and they physically moved. Now you have computerized cockpits where everything looks almost like a video game. You have LCD screens, LED screens, and most of the gauges that you're looking at are controlled by a computer, and they're not controlled by atmosphere or wind. That's probably the major differences. And uh, this may be a little over somebody's head who's not actually a pilot or flying, but shooting approaches now are much different. Where we had a lot of ground-based systems, it's now moved to a lot of satellite systems, which make the approaches actually much more accurate. But as far as we say, stick and rudder, as far as handling the airplanes, that's basically about the same. Go ahead, Mike. You can continue.
No, I was also just going to add some of the navigational systems have become obsolete, and as we're seeing even more
Correct.
getting ready to be phased out, like Loran and of course VORs are coming to their end, and everything is going to be satellite based, all part of the next gen development system with air navigation. So you're going to see a lot of new things coming online, but they're all computer based, technology driven. Next year, there's a mandate that aircraft traveling the airspace have the ADSB in and out systems. This is that way they can be broadcasting and everyone can be tracked, everyone can be seen. So it should create a safer environment as well as a much more manageable environment.
Okay, well, Mike, I'm going to have you
That's
walk us
correct.
through. Oh no, I'm sorry, T-Bone. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, yeah, he's correct on that. And a lot of that is going to be mandated next year, year 2020. And they also are coming out with, it's called CPDLC, which is basically when I travel from the United States to Bermuda, once I'm so far out over the ocean, I can no longer talk to the air traffic controllers because I'm out of
Really?
range.
Wait a
So
minute.
Right.
Hold on. Wait a minute.
the
Hold,
people
hold,
that
hold, hold,
we
hold, hold,
actually
hold, hold,
talk
hold, hold. Wait a minute. Hold. Wait a minute, T-Bone. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. You're saying there's times when you no longer can talk to the air traffic controller. How does that
That's
work?
correct. Because
I mean, no, no,
that's
no.
correct
Hold
because I'm
on. See,
actually out of.
see.
Oh, go
I don't,
ahead.
I don't know a lot about flying, but that, in the sense of somebody else being in the air, you knowing where you are, and somebody else is, So how does that work? If you
Well,
no longer can
actually,
talk to them.
once I'm no longer able to talk to the air traffic controllers, we use what's called an HF radio. That's a high frequency radio. And basically, it's you're talking to another guy who basically has a ham radio. You relay your message to him. He actually calls air
Relays it.
traffic control and relays the message. Now, what that does is we have what's called compulsory position reports, which means when we get to a certain point, we have to report that point. We have to report our altitude and speed. We radio to this guy who has the ham radio. He then radios back to air traffic control. Now, anybody else that's in that area, that's how they keep up with everybody. So if I'm at a specific altitude, a certain altitude, he will not let anybody else fly at that altitude until I pass my point. So that's the way they keep everybody separated. So they know
Okay.
where you are at all times. It's almost as if you were plotting it on paper. Any changes that I would like to make, altitude-wise or speed-wise or heading-wise, I have to relay that to the guy who has the ham radio. He will then radio air traffic control to get a approval before I can make any changes. Now, once I'm in range of Bermuda, then I'm able to talk to the air traffic controllers again. But the CPDLC that they're coming out with now will basically be just like I can text you on my phone, I can get
Uh-huh.
on my flight management system and text air traffic control, and I don't have to talk to anybody. And the
Right.
ADSB that Mike was talking about is also a way that they can know where you are at all times. They can see your airplane, they can see your altitude, they can see your speed.
Okay.
So all of that new technology is coming out where it's going to be a lot less talking and a lot more computer oriented flight.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Mike, I was going to ask you the question of vision of flights once, and I was going to ask you to explain what goes on starting from start to finish when the kids come in, but I also want to explain what's the follow-up once the day has ended. But first, let me play this promo of what's coming up next month. Hi, I'm Charles Morris, and I have with me Mike McKenzie, and we want to invite you to the 16th annual What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit. And this year, it's going to be even more special because I have the man right here with me, and he's here to tell us more about Vision of Flights and what's going to be taking place on May 18th. So you need to listen up and check it out. Mike, what's going on May 18th?
Well, May 18th, we're going to introduce Vision of Flight to the community, and we're going to introduce it through your program.
Okay.
Because where we stand now, we need to get as many of our young people involved in the professions of aviation and airspace. There's a need for over 1 million personnel, career fields that are just outstanding, from pilots, mechanics, engineers. I mean, every profession you can imagine. And we need to make sure there's ample diversity and inclusion in every one of those positions and career fields. So we're inviting you to come out and learn for yourself, see for yourself that aviation offers bright futures to every young person out here in Central Florida.
Okay, now you heard it from the man himself, and I just want to ask real quick, how long you been flying?
I've been flying. You're trying to tell my age. I've been flying since I was 13 years old. Actually, Yeah, right at 13, I started flying.
Alrighty then. Alrighty then. Well, listen, it is the 16th annual What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit. It's going to take place May 18th and May 25th. On the 25th, we're going to be right out here at the Orlando Executive Airport. And the kids are going to be able to get into a plane.
They're going to get into a plane with an instructor and actually take control of their destiny. How about that?
Alrighty then. Right here at the Orlando Executive Airport. You got to sign up. We're asking for you, the parents, the kids, to come on out because you're going to learn about the wonderful world of aviation. You heard it from the man right here who's been flying ever since he was 13 years old. So it's the 16th annual What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit taking place May 18th and May 25th. Make sure you sign up. Limited space available. All right, Mike. So kind of take us through your day of vision of flights when the kids come in. Kind of walk us through that day.
Yes, so, of course, we have our welcome orientation, basically, as to the different things that we'll utilize, like basic ground school. We'll then go into simulation and that type of usage. We'll go out on the flight line, do the walk around inspection, so the kids all understand the different parts and operations around an airplane and the airport. And from there, we'll divide in groups and we'll start them flying. Some will be inside working with the simulators, doing basically the same thing they'll be doing once they get in the air. And we'll have a nice lunch and speak and debrief about what they experienced, talk to them about some of the careers that they can maybe look at going into. We'll have a couple of different mentors. Maybe I'll even have Alan. Maybe Alan will be there. Wouldn't that be great if Alan was here?
Well, I tell you, I'm going to look into possibly trying to make that. I won't promise anything, but I'm going to look into trying to make that.
We understand, but if it's at all possible, we'd love to have you at any of our events. We'd love to have you. Your story is definitely will resonate well because your story is my story. It's it's a bunch of the other guys that you'll meet. It's their story as well, and I think the kids need to understand that we didn't come from money and had that to just run there and grab a pilot's license. We had to work. We did whatever it took to get that flight hour paid for, and it might have taken a year, 2 years, or 10 years. But the fact is that we have my buddy Ray, who I'll be speaking to you about, Alan. But he's been at it for a long time. Time. He was at one flight school, and that place had a bad dealing. Then they shut down. But Ray is still here, and I need to get him hired. He's getting old. So, the thing is, we're going to be there to open their minds to all the possibilities. And in one setting, I think we'll accomplish just that. Even if we got one or two out of that group to realize that there is something greater out there for them, Charles, I think we'll have done a magnificent job, because no matter what, the group in its entirety will go back to the community and share amongst their peers that today we experienced something really special. And that is what we're looking for.
No,
we need, I think a lot of the kids that are not exposed to these type of careers, they think it's out of reach, but being exposed to things like visions of flight will hopefully show them that it's not out of reach if they are determined to, improve and become a pilot.
That's it.
I'm pretty sure that, and this is for all of us, because it's when you're not able to think about it and think that it can happen for you, but as each one of you tell your story, it's you you can say, I mean, you can witness to this, how when you do tell your story, somehow or another, somebody's always in the right place to help you, to take you from point A to point B that you never knew was going to be there. But once you started down that journey, then this person comes into play. This person steps into your life. This person puts you here. And you go like, and before you know it, you started over here, but because of faith and you being determined, God always puts somebody in place to take you to the next step. And that, and a lot of times we don't see that or understand that until we look back and we be like, oh, wow,
Wow.
such and such was here.
That's
Somebody
how
came
God.
into my life to help me go to the next step. And that's how life is.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I,
So,
I,
You
I've
know,
always been a believer.
no,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Al.
No,
Go
I'm just
ahead,
saying
Al.
I've always been a believer that you do what you can and God will do what you can't. You make
That's
the effort
exactly it.
and he'll carry you to your destination. That's not a problem. I've always believed that, and that's probably one of the reasons that anything I start, I never want to quit until I've completed it. So it's just one of those things. That's just part of my personality. If I start something, I'm going to do my very best to finish it. And when
Okay.
I started flying, I was going to definitely do my best to get my private pilot's license. I mean, it was expensive, but as I said, I was trimming trees, I was mowing lawns, I had a full-time
You did
job,
what
I
you
was working as
did.
a part-time mechanic, whatever I could do to make that extra dime so I could take another flying lesson, I did it.
And man, you're the epitome of success and a model for the community. Really, definitely an inspiration. Um, your
Thank
story
you.
is good, really good.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I was asking now, once the kids go through the vision of flights for that day, and let's just say it's just like I'm overwhelmed, I'm wild, and I'm finding that this might be my passion. What do you do for kids that you see have a true interest? Is there some type of follow through once the day is
Well,
ended?
usually we invite them to come back to our workshops because at our workshops they're still building time. They're logging, even if it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they're logging time because they're working with an instructor. Also, we have our summer camp that follows up in July. That's a flight camp, whereas they leave there with about 1.5 hours of flight time. And as Alan can tell you, flight hours, you grab them where you can, and
That's right.
you pick up at the time wherever you can. And whenever
That's
you can
it.
get in that seat and log time, it's valuable. But at our camp, they also go and we visit like JetBlue University. We'll spend a day there where they get to work on the actual flight sims that are used at that level, professional level sims, and learn about the various career options that exist for them in the airline industry. Sometimes we'll go to SimCom, which more or less deals with GA aviation careers and or GA type flying and learning about the different options that are there for them that way. We might visit a school, which can be an Embry-Riddle or FIT. We'll do it as a field trip. We like to visit air shows, and we get groups together and we go to the air shows. We go in and we see some of our sponsors that help us out a little bit. And, that's another segment that I'll have to get with you on, Charles, because
Okay.
we need to start serious fundraising because I need to make sure that we can keep this somewhat affordable for
Okay.
these kids.
Right.
And you spoke about somebody that's very close to me, actually, Mr. Vince Carter,
Okay.
Jr.
Yeah.
Jr. Yeah, he's my
Okay.
buddy, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
longtime client.
oh, okay. Let me. I got two questions before we end the show, and that is first, T-Bone. Last show, I asked Mike, and he kind of went in and explained, which was kind of funny, the first time he went up by himself and how his instructor kind of tricked him into making that happen. But I'm going to ask you, what was it like for you the first time you went up by yourself? And how did that happen?
Charles, I couldn't wait to go up by myself.
See, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, you have to have so many hours, and then you do what's called your very first solo, where your instructor actually, he goes up with you and just kind of sits there and let you do everything, make sure you're okay and safe. And then he gets out of the airplane and turns it over to you. And your first solo, you go up and you do, and most people do a touch and go and then come back and land, or they'll just come back and just straight land. Well, the instructor got out of the airplane, and now I have to laugh at this myself. When he got out of the airplane and was walking away, I was thinking to myself, I got it now. So anyway, I called ground control, and I don't remember the tail number of the airplane, but I'll just use one. I said, Craig Ground, Tomahawk 26 Sierra Alpha, student pilot, first solo, ready for taxi. Okay. And when you tell them you're a student pilot, then they speak slowly and they give you specific instructions, because if you've been flying a while and you talk to traffic controllers, most of them speak very fast. But when you tell them you're a student pilot, they speak very slowly. So I taxied out to the runway, and once I was ready for takeoff, he cleared me for takeoff, and I took off, and the first time, just me being in the air by myself with an airplane, I kept thinking I could stay up here forever. So I came around, I did my first, and Mike, you may laugh at this one, I did my bounce and go. It wasn't a touch, it was a bounce and go. I mean, I bounced that airplane off of the runway pretty good. So I was going around again.
But I bet every bounce, you had a big smile while you were bouncing the whole time. You were smiling. I know it.
I did what I call my bounce and go. So as I was coming around the pattern again, I was on downwind. So I'm thinking to myself, now I'm going to have to get this right. And I'm determined to always try my best to get something right before I quit. Mike, it was funny. I actually did 8 touch and goes before I landed. Once I landed and taxied back up to the flight school, my instructor said, I didn't think you were going to ever come down. But I had such a good time on my first solo. It was really great. But I think another time the most fun I had was when I did my very first cross country solo. That was another a great time. But I could not wait to do my first solo. I was anxious.
Okay, well, this is my last question. Mike, the simulator, how accurate, how does that help you, or how real is that in preparation to help you learn to fly, or to feel what you need to feel, or to go through the process and learning the whole process when you're trying to learn how to fly? How real is that simulator in preparing you? And T-Bone, I don't know if you went through that, or where you are on that, or if you use that to learn to fly the jet or whatever, but how real is that, and how is that helping you learn how to fly the plane?
It's very real. I mean, simulator, you can pretty much create any situation at any airport in any environment, and you can make as many mistakes as you want. So the simulator is very important to applications as far as getting it down. I mean, I still use it now, just a home sim, Flight Sim X or X-Plane, just before flying to somewhere that I'd never been before. I do it on the simulator, and I kind of get general understanding of what's around and how that approach would look um, before going and do it. I mean, it's great stuff, and the cost has come down so much that it's very practical for any kid to turn their home computer into a flight computer station.
Okay.
So I definitely find that to be a useful tool.
Yeah. T-Bone, do you
Yeah, I
use it?
agree with that.
Have you used it?
Well, no, I have not done the home simulators, but flying a corporate jet, we have to stay current, and every year we have to go to recurrent training. And the simulators now are very sophisticated. They can pretty much duplicate just about any situation that you could get into, and also any airport you want to go into. I did some training for mountain flying because I carry people up into Colorado, up in Eagle, Colorado, and up into the mountains where they like to go for vacation and snow ski. So the mountain flying obviously was kind of important because of the altitude, because of the mountain waves, and obviously in a lot of cases
Right.
because of the snow. But I've been into Aspen, Colorado, Eagle, Colorado, places like that. But the simulator
One of the
definitely
trickiest airports.
teaches you a lot about technique, and you can, as Mike was saying, you can practice things over and over, and it's not dangerous. When I go to recurrent training, we do things in the simulator that would be much too dangerous to try and practice in the actual airplane. However, if it does happen in the airplane, you're prepared for it because you've practiced it, and I can say it almost comes as second nature because you go over it in the simulator until the instructor says, okay, I'm satisfied with that. But we go through things as far as stalls. We go through different types of weather. We have aircraft problems. We have engine failures. We have engine fires. There's so much they can do in the simulator to teach you how to handle situations. And it's very, very helpful because the only time that we actually do that stuff is in the simulator. And there's a lot of things they do to you in the simulator you hope you don't get in an airplane. But I've gotten everything from jam flight controls to rudders failing. I think one guy actually, I took off and he actually jammed the throttles forward so that they would not move. He locked them in place so that they would not move. He wanted to see how I was going to handle that situation. But I think they sit down sometimes and just think of things that they can do to actually improve you.
Yes.
And there has been a lot of crashes because of wind shear. They can actually duplicate that in the simulator. There's an aircraft that crashed in Charlotte some years ago because of wind shear. They actually can program that in the simulator and then let you fly that exact simulation, and they actually study how to avoid that or how to get out of that. So they teach us wind shear. They teach us how to recognize wind shear, which is the most important thing. And that actually, saves lives, because if those guys had recognized wind shear at that particular time, they may not have crashed.
Right.
But
Well,
the simulator is a great tool for teaching anybody how to fly. Or, as I say, we go to recurrent training, so there's different things that we learn every time we go to flight safety.
well, Mike, I can only imagine if they have T-Bone in there when T-Bone come out of there, man, that thing is smoking. It's probably about to about to burn up. I'm serious. Well, I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time out to come on and T-Bone. I mentioned this to you like actually I think about 2 years ago, and now that you see what I do, I'm going to invite the both of you back now, and I know it's a long time away, but I'm going to invite you back next year because I want to talk to you during Black History Month. And again, we're going to go over, you see, you can't believe the myth. And that, see, we have two black pilots who've been doing this for a very long time and very successful and broke through all the stereotypes and the myths itself to let you know that dreams can come true. And one of the things that both of you talked about was getting past the myth, believing in yourself, dealing with the obstacles, and just making it happen. And so,
Okay.
right, and Mike, Vision of Flights, uh, next month as part of Youth Central and What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit. We're inviting the parents and the kids to take part. We're going to give them the information. This is the 16th annual What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit. I think it's so very important. And to find out more information on Vision of Flights, of course, we can send you here. If I can pull it up real quick, I know I have it. We can Vision of Flights. We can go there to the website and find out more information. And like all of us on social media, you can follow them on Twitter. You can like them on Facebook as well. So that's Vision of Flights. And you make sure that you go to the website to find out more about this amazing, great program that's been going on. And Mike, how long Vision of Flights have been around?
We started in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've been out here almost 8 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to thank the both of them. That's Alan Wilson, aka T-Bone, and also Mike McKenzie of Vision of Flights for taking the time to come on the Journey
A
2020.
pleasure.
All right. Thanks,
My
guys.
pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Well, I don't know if you could tell, but I had a very good time doing this show today with Mike McKenzie of Vision of Flight, and also a friend who I've been knowing since I was 7 years old, Alan Wilson, aka T-Bone. And he straightened me out on some things because I thought we were much younger when we went up in the plane for the very first time. But then he reminded me because I just could relate it back to when I thought I was away from home. And it was not too often I came home once I went off to college, but evidently I had spent some time in Jacksonville, and I didn't remember. But all I remember was us putting our money together and us going up in a plane, and that was his journey. And he's been a pilot now. I think he's saying for about, I think he said 49 years. But anyway, am I dating myself? Am I dating T-Bone? But for those out there who would like to find out more information, you can always, right here, you can email us at thejourney2020.com at Gmail. I'm sorry, thejourney2020 at gmail.com. Like I said, like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. Would really appreciate that. And if you would like to find out more information, like I said, you can, definitely go on the website, and all of that information is there. And remember, for Vision of Flight, that there's limited space because we want to make sure that the kids, all of them are able to get to the point where they can fly the plane that day. And so there's limited space. Well, as you know, the journey comes to you every Monday at 7 p.m. at www.thejourney2020.com. Also, I want to remind you of my friend, Vince Carter Sr., where we do Youth Central Sports every Wednesday night at 11 p.m., where we have a lot of fun and we're talking sports. And we're actually doing a summit with him as well, which is called Sports is More Than Just a Game. That's in the month of July, so that's coming up as well. But tune in to Youth Central Sports, 11 p.m. every Wednesday at www.youthcentralsports.com. And with that being said, a reminder, the third Monday of every month, right here on the Journey 2020, our very own Kathy Meek. She is our sex therapist. We have a lot of fun and conversation. The fourth Monday, we have Akina Kruma from Young Fathers of Central Florida. He answers a lot of questions when it comes to child support. Yes, very informative, a walking encyclopedia. I'm telling you, he's knowledgeable, he has passion, and he's going to help you. So, but he's also going to help you do the right thing. All right, stepping up to the plate, being a good father, understanding your responsibilities. And so with that being said, again, if you would like to find out more information about the upcoming event, the 16th annual What's My Anti-Drug Youth Summit featuring Vision of Flight, where the kids, they start out to simulate it. By the end of the day, they're actually flying the plane. So definitely find out more information about that. Hit us up. And any other questions that you may have right here on the Journey 2020. Well, I'm Charles Morris. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. And I just want to say, enjoy the rest of your week. You be blessed.